In 1976, jazz rock and jazz funk were everywhere. The most ubiquitous type of music around the world, from Japan to Germany. There were bands, straddling the nexus between jazz, rock, funk, combining them all into these great instrumental releases of utmost musicianship. And one of the luckiest of these many bands was the Dutch act Spin, who, believe it or not, scored a top 40 song on the US Billboard chart with Grasshopper that year. And from that same album, the 1976 self-titled first of two Spin albums, the track Excenter. Already, we definitely have an earworm here. That the way that thing just rises up, that meow meow, and then we have the xylophone. This is basically the verse. This figure that we heard from the beginning, and then that part that rises up, that's the chorus, basically. Okay, we're hearing the sizzling fretwork of Hans Hollestelle, who, let's see, has 669 credits according to Discogs. So very, oh wow, it says, yeah, he goes back to the Beat era. That's interesting how a lot of these, that by the mid-70s, the jazz rock scene was comprised of many people who had started in rock and pop during the mid-60s. And it was just kind of a natural progression, going from doing like simple foundationalist pop, in ABC form, to becoming more proficient in your instruments, to the point where you really wanted to expand and focus really on the musicianship. Okay, the reeds and flute are by Jan Vennik, and trumpet flugelhorn by Rein van der Broek. Let's see. 81 credits according to Discogs. Let's see. He was in Grupo Sportivo at one point. There are a few members of this band that were an exception, including Hans Hollestelle had recently been in like a mid-70s lineup of Exception. Let's see, and Jan Vennik has 84 credits according to Discogs. More of a jazz. Oh, he was in the Motions. Yeah, popular like beat group from the 60s. Okay, that must have been Jan Hollestelle, who, I believe related to Hans Hollestelle. Credited with bass, synthesizer, piano, violoncello. I swear I heard, I was hearing, or no, maybe it was Hans Jansen credited with keyboards. Yeah, yeah, it was Hans Jansen we just heard on the Fender Rhodes, and yeah, Hans Jansen has, oh wow, 268 credits according to Discogs, going back to mid '60s beat group The Marks. It looks like. And was also an exception for a time. Yeah, Spin are basically like primarily an exception spinoff. I love the polychords that are going on here. I mean, we have that first part. What I was referring to earlier is the verse that dun 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 dun, which it goes from like B to E, and then it stays in E like an extra number of bars, and then it goes into for that near near. It goes like into one of the instruments goes into D, but there's like some bass notes that are being played under it that kind of prevent it from being a pure D, like polychordal effect where like the bass is like on the B, where you have like a D triad be playing underneath it, and then the bass lowers. It might go down to G or something. That the main earworms of the song, like the that part and that those two, a section of that would really make a good like theme music to a '70s series. I'm thinking like a '70s cop show. Keyboards are what's making this part interesting. I think this part could have used a stronger ostinato. I'm basically drawn to the little keyboard work that's coming out of the side. I'm just kind of waiting for this to layer more. The guitarist is really now complementing the keyboards. Those two are starting to really interact, despite some of the weakness kind of in the rhythmic component overall. laying the sign down a little bit. We're fading, we're going out. Bubbles. Bubbles. Yeah, I was saying we're fading, we're going out because I was a little bit disappointed that I wasn't going to get to hear the main parts recapitulate. I wanted to hear those one more time, you know, the verse chorus of the song proper. Yeah, a really good track, largely on account of the verse chorus, you know, that I was talking about and the ending was interesting. I would trim about a minute out of the middle somewhere when it kind of dropped out and a little bit elongated. That part just could have used a stronger bass line. There was some kind of barren space in there. Yeah, clocking at 5 minutes and 22 seconds. I think I would cut it to about 4 minutes thereabouts. But the good parts are really good and stand out nonetheless. That was Spin, a band that released 2 albums circa 1976-77. I used to just imagine that they were a follow-through on Scope. It's amazing. Scope comes out in 74, puts out 2 albums, 74, 75. And then Spin comes along, puts out 2 albums, 76, 77. The similarity of names, you know, the monosyllabic S names, playing similar music. Scope being a little bit more jazz rocky, Spin being a little bit more jazz funky, you know. But moving with the times, you know. And in the trends in jazz, funk, jazz rock, you know, Scope coming out at the time. Being basically a product of the Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy influence. Spin seeming to have a bit more of the like jazz funk influences, like what maybe like what Ramsey Lewis was doing around this time. More like on the American jazz funk scene, and but the two have no relation whatsoever. Spin being much more, it seems like Scope, the members of Scope didn't have as much background, but the members of Spin being kind of like a Dutch supergroup, that each member like having lengthy careers, like each one of them having been like 5 notable bands going back to the early 60s. But, and most relevant to the Spin project, of course, being the time that several members spent in Exception, playing like on one of the band's strongest albums, Bingo, from 1974. Yeah, and going on to play in all kinds of Dutch pop after this. Yeah, this band's instrumental prowess would have definitely made them kept their phones ringing, even if there weren't going to be many more albums like this from any of them after the second Spin. But that's how it went for a lot of jazz rock musicians. You know, since they were so, you know, had all that dexterity, all that, you know, skill on the fretboard and such, they gained a lot of attention. In fact, a lot of those jazz rock albums from the 70s, as enjoyable as they are to listen to for just amazing musicianship and exciting, you know, dynamics and such, and compositional breadth. For the musicians themselves, they really served as like as kind of resumes of their skill set, you know, because people throughout the industry would hear these albums and say, oh, we need a guitarist or we need a keyboardist who's really skilled, who can just nail this solo or that solo or what, and these musicians would get called. A very different fate, I think, befell members of just conventional like power pop bands and such, who weren't really all that dazzling on their instruments, and so when their bands broke up after 2 albums and they had to go find other work, they ended up apparently going into like music journalism, and it kind of shows. Anyway, for more rubies and sapphires from Spin and from other great Dutch jazz rock bands, as well as symphonic rock, pop rock, you name it. MOR, AOR, hard rock, new wave, cold wave. See the album directory, the directory of albums by Benelux artists from the 70s and 80s linked below. And like and subscribe and follow me on Facebook and Twitter to know when the next videos are coming out. And until next time, this is Zaragon, the world's most ear travel maximalist, signing off.